This podcast is brought to you by Free Buddhist Audio, the Dharma for your life. Our work is funded entirely by donations from our generous listeners. If you would like to help us keep this free, make a contribution at freebuddhistaudio.com/donate. Thank you, and happy listening.
Thank you, Kashantikara. It's very difficult to give this talk, actually, after such an excellent talk yesterday. Anyway, as he's already preempted most of the content of my talk, I will just proceed as if he hasn't. Yeah, so very, very lovely to see you all here in the Shrine Room, and also a very big welcome to those of you online. Fantastic. Yeah, so the theme of the weekend that we're on is this lecture, Is a Guru Necessary? And it took place in 1970 when Sangharakshita was... he'd set up the movement, I think it's 3 years before, and then ordained people just 2 years before. So it's very, very early on in our Triratna Buddhist world. Maybe I'll just say, if anyone can't hear me, can you just say louder? Because I'm very happy to just increase. You're all right? Louder, thank you. That was good. Just be careful what you ask for, I think is the answer to that. Okay, I'm on it. Thank you. Yeah, so he's asking this question at a very, very early stage of Triratna. It's quite an edgy question for the founder of a Buddhist movement to ask, isn't it? Like he's trying to clarify, in a way he's trying to clarify what the movement needs, but he's also clarifying his own position, which is quite interesting to do in public. Clarify your position in a collective or in a community. And I just want to raise that as an interesting area, that his willingness to kind of go back to principles and clarify what are we really trying to do, and in a way clarify for himself, what am I really trying to give this order and this movement? And I think it's based on his own inner kind of questioning, his own integrity around those kind of questions he's asking himself. But also when you have the responsibility of creating community, you've got to ask quite deep questions as to what the nature of that community is going to be and what principles it's going to be formed on or based on. You know, what are the foundations, yeah? He's also been, at this point, practicing in India and then also in Britain for a short time, and seeing people relate to him in sometimes very odd ways, and he's also seen other people relating to other teachers in very odd ways. So again, it's raising the question, what is the nature of that relationship? What is the nature of that communication? And what bits do we need as a spiritual community, and which bits do we not need? Yeah. So I'd like to take Sangharakshita as an exemplar, actually, as an exemplar of thinking through for ourselves, the importance of thinking things through. Thinking things through for ourselves, standing free of assumed values or assumed views, assumed assumptions. We need to work out our own principles on which our life is based. And we need to work out if this community, which you might already be part of, is based on the principles that you yourself relate to or resonate with. So on this weekend, yesterday, having had such an excellent talk on the on the lecture itself, Is a Guru Necessary? I'm not going to be discussing very much of that here. Bhante, or Sangharakshita, gives it at the end of a series of talks called Aspects of the Higher Evolution, which was another sort of buzzword at the time. So what is evolution? And he's seeing disciples, or he's seeing people around him focusing on science and evolution, and he's thinking, well, what does it mean to evolve? Yeah, that's a different way of putting growth. What does it mean to evolve? So this lecture comes right at the end of that. And in the lecture, he tells us two things that are necessary for growth. One, contact with suffering. And two, contact with a guru, in the sense of a person more highly evolved or more highly developed. There are probably other things that are helpful or even fundamental, but these are the two things that he focuses on in this lecture. So I'm going to go into the first one, contact with suffering. So this doesn't mean that we need to be problem-orientated or nurse our suffering. Suffering is just inherent. It's stitched into our experience. There's no getting away from it. But suffering is only worth something if we use it as a motivating force. We've got to use it. We've got to find, in a way, we've got to find our own motivating force, a personal motivation which is strong and compelling, and which will become a reference point for our lives. So this will have a flavour of something universal, even though it'll be simply a personal moment. Yeah, you'll distill that personal moment into something which has got a universal force to it, and that will just direct your life now. I think sometimes we can look back on at these moments in our lives and see the directive influence that they have. Maybe we didn't even realise it at the time, although sometimes we do realise it. In my early years as a Buddhist, I went on several solitary retreats. Retreats where I lived alone for 2 or 3 weeks, with very little contact with anybody else. And they hold some of the happiest days of my life. Also, the most boring days of my life. And also the most significant experiences of my life. And I had one particular dialogue where I was battling with this level of boredom and kind of confusion. Like, why? Why am I doing this crazy thing, like living on my own for a few weeks and meditating, which, come on, let's face it, is quite boring quite often. Isn't it? Oh, yeah, okay. So I'm just checking. Am I the only person in the room? Okay, well, let's not go there right now. Okay, so sometimes my meditation's a bit boring. And I was asking myself, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And one answer. Well, the people I meet that are also doing this are quite interesting. And I'm quite extroverted. I thought, that's just got too many people in it. There's too many people in it. And then I thought, well, I'm trying to become something, and meditation seems to be the key. And I thought, it's just too abstract. It's a kind of weird sort of abstract thing. Where's the dustbins? I'll bring them in. And then I had this thought. This is the only thing that gives my life meaning. And it was a moment of deeper authenticity. I saw for the first time that this is what had got me up in the morning. I don't know how people get up in the morning without this, actually. In a way, for me, my meaning had to have a sense of direction and growth, a sense of purpose. Otherwise, my life was just flat and meaningless. I just don't know how I would get up in the morning. I mean, it's interesting because I went through art school and I followed the lives of artists, and they all knew exactly what they were doing when they got up in the morning. So it wasn't so much the content of the answer that was significant. Often I can just say, oh, it's what gives my life meaning. And it just sounds so meaningless, doesn't it? It sounds sort of glib. It's like something you've read from a book, like a self-help book, or like a good Buddhist book. But it was more that voice, that answer, came from a place in me which was only my own. Nobody else had tampered with that voice that I heard in that moment. It was just simply mine. It had come from a deeper place in myself that was truly my own voice and less influenced by externals. So I've built on this reference point over the years. I'm noticing moments of kindness or honesty and how that stimulated a faith response in me. A moment where I think, yes, that's good. That moment of authenticity, maybe in a group meeting and someone speaks the truth, maybe their own truth, and you know instinctively, yes, heart response, that is good. Yeah. So I begin to see stitched in how my life has meaning. And I learnt over the years that I'm pitched against a strong nihilistic tendency, a strong nihilistic view in myself, that really, bedrock, there is nothing meaningful in this life. And that's what I'm pushing against all the time. So after the death of my grandmother, it wasn't a tragic death. She was maybe 99, 98 or something when she died. She was living on her own. She had a bad day that day, and then she died. That's not a bad way to go. But I was very open at that time. I'd been recently ordained, and that openness was still very alive in me. And I thought, maybe not thought isn't quite the right word, an image appeared in my mind. And I thought, I'm in a dark room, and there's no windows, and there's no door, and there's no way out. And people, I talked to people about it, and they said, maybe this is to do with grief. You're grieving after your grandmother's died. It's a room of grief. I thought, no, that isn't a room of grief. And then I thought, it's the room where I find myself when I'm in a life without faith. It's the nihilistic view that nothing really matters. It's a life without faith. That's what that room is. So all I'm trying to do is keep a door open in that room for myself, one, and for others who find themselves in that room too. That's all I'm trying to do. So my life is centred around keeping a door open in that dark room of nihilism. A door for myself out into faith, and also for others trapped in that room. Sangharakshita says, meaning is not a thing that you can grasp by looking in a dictionary. Meaning must be meaning for you. Something that you personally experience. Our quest for meaning is therefore a quest for ourselves, a quest for totality, the wholeness of our being. How are we doing on volume? Can I just check? Yep. Good, thank you. So how are we to strengthen that motivation, which is just starts as a seed sometimes? Well, avoid distractions. If you give into a lot of distractions, you're never going to consolidate your energies into the direction that really nourishes you or gives your life meaning. So this is one of the first things you need to do. There's this interesting phenomena, isn't there, called FOMO in English. I don't know what it's called anywhere else. That fear of missing out. Really? Ask yourself to be truthful. When you feel that fear of missing out, ask yourself, am I really that interested in that party? Or am I really interested in that movie? Or am I really interested in that exciting person over there? Really? What you're trying to do is say yes to something. But in order to say yes to something, you need to also say no to something else. Then work out your choices. Renunciation is following the call of one's heart, saying no because you're truly trying to say yes to something else. What else? Lead a lifestyle that includes meditation. Boring. Study the Dharma. Super interesting. Go on regular retreats. Pretty interesting, but there is quite a lot of meditation. Solitary retreats. Super significant, but boring. And also happy. Develop regular contact and communication with friends, particularly spiritual friends. In other words, there needs to be constant reminders of your real goal and where your true interest lies. Do you know where your true interest lies? Recognize in your faith, recognize in your life your response of faith to ordinary day-to-day moments, and begin to understand what is really important to you. And Kashantakara was talking when he was introducing me about me being somebody that moved dustbins. I remember once when I was in another retreat centre in Europe, and somebody took a photograph of me washing up. I rest my case. No, but I thought, why is he doing that? But I think what he's trying to do, what he was doing was he was thinking the spiritual life includes life. I think really that's what he was doing. He was taking a photograph of somebody that he saw as a teacher, and they were washing up. Of course. But it was what it was a moment of faith where something that he thought was exotic, maybe, was being brought into the kitchen or into the washing up. Recognize your response of faith to daily moments, and then cherish that moment. Allow that seed to grow in you. We need to strengthen our motivation. We need to strengthen and build on it, yeah? Vision isn't just a one-off moment. It needs strengthening. I remember asking a friend what I should do with my experiences after the death of my father. And I'd nursed him through his last stages of death when he was 56. And she replied, capitalize on it. That was you. It was helpful. Yeah, I said to her, my friend, what should I do with this experience? And she said, Rachel, just capitalize on it. And I knew immediately that I had to kind of invest in that experience. Capitalize is interesting, isn't it? It's like money. You've got to invest in something. And this was an experience that needed investing in. Invest your energies in these moments where things are a bit clearer, the priorities are a bit more obvious, and when you're in touch with something that really does answer your deeper values. Invest in those moments. And now tell me what you choose to do with your life. And then the other point that Sangharakshita raises in the lecture is this second thing, the second necessity for growth. We need contact with a guru in the sense of a being, a person more highly developed, more highly evolved. So we do need a guru. Many years ago, I read in one of the Triratna magazines, I read an interview with a Tibetan nun. And she'd taken a vow of celibacy. And she was asked what support she drew on to support her in that vow of celibacy. And she said that her strongest emotional support was through doing a meditation practice called the Guru Yoga. And this meditation is based on a visualization of the founder of her Buddhist tradition, the founder and the lineage of her Buddhist tradition, and developing a relationship with the guru through a visualization. She was a Dharma teacher in her own right, and she had disciples in her own right. But she said that her relationship with those people around her were distant and not significant. And I realised this was completely different from my experience in Triratna, where my emotional nourishment was met through friendships with my peers on a horizontal level and with those more experienced on a vertical level. I began to see how the Sangha was a living context for meeting spiritual friends as peers and as Kalyana Mitras. Kalyana Mitras being those who embody values more than I do. That there was something incredibly nourishing and supportive in my contact with the Sangha. I don't think we realise, actually, how this vision of the Sangha in Triratna is so different from many other Buddhist movements. For many of us, it's the only version we know, and it's just what we've grown accustomed to. But in fact, there is a strong individual vision behind the whole format of the way we practice Sangha in this movement. And it's a vision of friendship and a vision of communication. So what about this issue of meeting a guru? You can think of the guru in two different ways. A bearer of the archetype, and also an exemplar of the ideal. So the bearer of an archetype is a human being that has become, for some people, a living symbol of a higher dimension of reality. I think Dalai Lama is quite like that. He's still a human being, but actually he's seen as something, a symbol of something which is much more than that. I think in India, Dr. Ambedkar is also that. And then you have the guru as an exemplar of the ideal, as a human being whom one sees as a human being. But it's a human being that embodies spiritual ideals more fully, more completely than one does oneself. And we can see this even in ordinary friendship. When a friend has qualities that we admire or we wish to emulate, although the friendship itself still remains very much on the human level. In Triratna, I think we focus much more on the guru in the second sense, as an exemplar of the ideal, as a human being that we see as a human being, but who embodies spiritual ideals more fully than we do. And we see that person as a Kalyana Mitra, someone that helps us contact the Kalyana. So the Kalyana is a very beautiful word. It means beautiful, auspicious, morally good, and thus spiritual. It pertains to higher values, higher than human, if you like, transhuman virtues. And Mitra simply means friend. So a Kalyana Mitra is a friend that turns us or helps us turn towards the beautiful or the morally good. And a Kalyana Mitra in that work is an exemplar of an ideal. They do it through exemplification. They exemplify the path. And it's somebody who we feel a real genuine affection for, as well as respect and admiration, receptivity. If there's too much idealism or projection, then there won't be any genuine communication. So to some extent, you have to push through that. And it has to be also just human being communicating with human being. And the relationship is turned towards this quality of the Kalyana. So within that kind of communication with a spiritual friend, it is not so important that somebody is higher than you or more evolved than you are. What's more important is that there's genuine communication. So is there somebody in your life where there is genuine communication? Sangharakshita asks us, or says to us, it isn't generally realised what a lot of hard work is necessary, even to bring about a small change. Old habits die hard. And he says, I think every person really needs, in a sense deserves, that really intensive contact and communication, to have someone really working with them. Otherwise, they won't change very quickly, or not as quickly as they could. So it's helpful to have people in our lives. It's even necessary to have people in our lives to help us work on ourselves, especially in the beginning, I think, particularly in the beginning. So the beginning of our spiritual life, say, the first 10 or 15 years, I just offer that, okay? That is the beginning. I can say that I have never forgotten some of the significant moments of communication that happened to me in the decade leading up to my ordination. The communication and engagement I received during those formative years have formed the bedrock of my whole spiritual life. I stand here as somebody who's been created, if you like, through that communication in those early years, and then from then on, through all the institutions and the contact I've had with people in this movement. So in Triratna, this need for a guru is fulfilled by Kalyana Mitra relationships and by genuine communication. And you can see the Sangha as a context for mutual modification of being. I don't know how you feel about being modified. On a good day, it probably feels quite good. You think, oh, I'm a sort of raw diamond that's getting a bit shaped. You know? I assure you, on a bad day, it doesn't feel like that. Sangharakshita says, we learn from those we associate with, especially those who are more mature than us. And learning will clearly be important if we're to make progress in the spiritual life. The knowledge we need in the end is self-knowledge. And the real significance of deep individual-to-individual contact that going for refuge to the Sangha involves lies in the simple fact we get to know ourselves best in relation to other people. Through meeting the challenge of real communication, one comes to know oneself better. So the Sangha is a context for real communication. There is that beautiful line from Triratna's verses of dedication that says, may our communication with one another be Sangha. And I've always loved that line. And the reason I love it is because it shows the dynamic nature of communication. It's not just that you go along to the Sangha and talk about Buddhism. It's more that the way you communicate yourself, the way that you authentically share yourself, is how you become part of the Sangha. Sangha is not just a group of people. It's a process of communication that needs nourishing and developing, and each one of us has a responsibility to help that happen. Effective communication and friendship change us in a way that is hard to anticipate if only we allow it to do so. At this point, Sangha becomes guru and teacher. there is a modification of being, if only we allow it. And the knowledge we need, as Sangharakshita says, is self-knowledge. We get to know ourselves best in relation to other people. Through meeting the challenge of real communication, one comes to know oneself better. So this isn't an easy path, although it can be a very beautiful path and very heartwarming. But there are things that stop us from entering that sphere. There are many factors that stop us from being receptive to other people and to learning about ourselves through communication. And I just want to mention two aspects, quite big aspects: ignorance and self-view. So ignorance is not a lack of information. Ignorance is a stubborn refusal to accept anything that might threaten one's ego identity. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? I can feel a morning coming on, actually. So ignorance resists the development of awareness. It manifests as a resistance, a rigidity, and a lack of receptivity. So this can manifest in actions where we refuse to learn, we lack receptivity, and in the area of community or relationship, it's very detrimental, it's very complicated. It's like a closure around communication, a hardness to being modified. A hardness to being modified through communication, through relationship. And in the spiritual community, this is very confusing because we're saying we want to change, we're saying we want to grow, and then we wriggle, we deflect, and we body swerve. And this creates a very strange push-pull situation. In English, the word ignorance contains the word ignore. It's describing our how we actively ignore information coming through to the system. If you like, we're a closed system. That's a modern way of putting it, isn't it? Yeah. We need to become a more open system. If we're a closed system, then ignorance just gets more and more embedded. And another way that we hinder our ability to learn from relationships and community is through self-view. So self-view is the view, the wrong view, that underlies all wrong views. We equate our psychophysical experience with an absolute substantial self. And that absolute substantial self needs protecting. And in particular, it needs protecting from others. Sangharakshita's got this very interesting line. He says, it's not just the content of our thinking, it's the continent of our thinking that is the problem. In other words, it's not the content as in what we're actually the content of what we're actually thinking. It's more like where we're thinking from. And where are we thinking from? It's happening from a view that we have about ourselves. And that view needs protecting. It doesn't want to be challenged. So all the time we're justifying our viewpoints or our actions to provide reasoned explanations which serve to disguise the true reasons for them, this self-view. I feel like the ethical and social impact of our protection around self-view is that we apply really strong filters to our experience. If we have a view about ourselves, then everything is happening through that filter, through that perspective. And we're trying to keep building on that view. So if, for instance, we have a view that we're unlovable, then we interpret our experience so that it reinforces that view. It doesn't matter what the world tells us objectively. We interpret our experience from the place or the continent of our self-view. And in this way, we don't just live in the world, we live in a world that we have created for ourselves. Okay, so the title of this talk is the electric charge of communication. So people ask me, why have you called this the electric charge of communication? And I said, I have a publicity officer. And she said to me, I think you mentioned it sometimes, Saddhanandi. I think I mentioned existential. She went, that does ring a bell. Anyway, it's good. So here I am talking about the electric charge of communication to serve my publicity officer. One needs a strong motivating force in one's life. So communication is a key term in Sangharakshita's presentation of the Sangha and of friendship. So in fact, this talk could have been called the electric charge of Sangha, or in fact, the electric charge of friendship. In the lecture, Is a Guru Necessary? Sangharakshita says, and this is the line, yeah? Contact between the Guru and the disciple should be existential. There should be real communication between them, not just the sharing of thoughts or ideas or feelings or even experiences, even spiritual experiences, but communication of being, or, if you like, action and interaction of being. The Guru and the disciple need to be themselves as fully as possible in relation to each other. The Guru's business is not to teach the disciple anything, but simply to be himself in relation to that disciple. Nor, as the disciple, is it your business to learn. You simply have to expose yourself to the being and to the effect of the being, of the Guru, and at the same time be totally yourself in relationship to them. In other words, the duty of a spiritual friend is not to teach anything, but simply to be themselves in relationship to the pupil or disciple. Nor, as the disciple, is it our business to learn. We just have to expose ourselves to the effect of our spiritual friends and be authentic in relationship to them. And in this way, there will be real communication, existential communication. So this existential communication leads to growth and to change. It is, in fact, growth and change. The effect of real communication is the electric charge. Electricity is an interesting metaphor for communication. In fact, I can think of two friends, two dharmacharanis, who both specialise in facilitating communication. And both of them were originally trained as electrical engineers. That's kind of strange, isn't it? Yeah. So anyway, I did a good thing. I looked up in the dictionary what electricity is, yeah? As you do. It said, a fundamental form of energy observable in positive and negative forms that occurs naturally, as in lightning in a storm, or is produced, like as in generator, and that is expressed in terms of movement and interaction of electrons, electric currents or power. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? I'll follow my form. I've got translating going on. So the metaphor of positive and negative forms, of movement and interaction of current. So in communication, both parties or both bodies direct the current of electricity. And both bodies or parties receive the electricity or receive the current or receive the communication. Communication is dependent on a willingness to express ourselves and a willingness to receive an expression of other. Electricity is a form of energy that is expressed in terms of movement and interaction. And interestingly, Sangharakshita says there should be real communication, communication of being, or if you like, action and interaction of being. It's quite a similar line, isn't it? And then you've got these two different ways that electricity can occur. Naturally, like in a flash of lightning, or in static. And it can be produced, as in a generator of electricity. So applying this metaphor to communication means real communication, like electricity, can occur naturally, a spontaneous arising from the conditions in your life, like a chance communication or conversation at a tea break or on a train that can change your life. We need to be conductors of lightning, conductors of real communication. Actually, I'm just going to go off script briefly. When I was travelling from here to London recently, I was on a train and something happened and I got into a bit of conversation with a woman on the train. And then we sat separately and we travelled to London. But on the platform, when we got off at Euston, she said to me, were you all right? There's something had happened on the train. Were you all right after that? And I said, yes, I was fine. And she said, do you live in London? And I said, no. And then I took a risk. And I said, I live in a Buddhist retreat centre. And she said, oh, do you live in Taraloka? And I said, no. But interestingly, I lived there for 20 years, but I don't live there anymore. And she said, oh, well, where do you live? And I said, I live in Adhisthana. And she said, oh, my mum's going there in 2 weeks. I'm just wondering, could you just tell me if anyone's got a daughter that went to London 4 weeks ago? I'm still trying to find out where they are. But anyway, whoever it was, the mother is attending the Birmingham Buddhist Centre. Hello, if you're just recognising me right now. And it was this lovely moment. And she said to me, I could tell there was something different about you. And I suspect it was a lovely moment between us where there was a bit more communication than you normally have getting off a train at Euston. So communication arises naturally, like a lightning. When I was attending art school, I'm on almost my last page here. When I went to my second art school in London, on the very early stages, where I was still doing quite basic drawing, 2 tutors walked around the studio looking at work and giving you feedback, as they do. And one tutor said to me, "This is very good work, Rachel, well done." And the other person said, "Yeah." But then the other person came back to me and they said, "I should never have said this was good work. I should have said, anybody who can draw like this should be drawing much, much better." Boring or what? Very good feedback. What it showed me in that moment was a good technique can disguise a lack of creativity. That is a lesson for life. Where do you have good technique in your life and not much creativity? In that moment, and for the next few months, I made a leap and produced work where other people would say, "I wished I'd produced that one." Real communication, like electricity, can be generated, can be developed, can be produced by a machine, if you like. Communication can be developed or generated in contexts which is there to generate communication. Where a context where there is kindness and a clarity, where there is a shared purpose, a shared vision, then real communication will be generated and maintained through all the power cuts, yeah? A Sangha which holds a vision for real communication and in-depth friendship, a Sangha at its best produces the electric charge of communication. And each one of us is responsible for that thing happening. We need to take responsibility for creating such a Sangha, for creating friendships, for generating that kind of communication for ourselves and for others. Essentially, this communication is existential, i.e., it challenges our very existence, or it touches the nature of our existence. It can become a shock, it can come as a shock, because our old self will be challenged. The existing habit of self is challenged, and that aspect will change or will die. Nagabodhi, in the recent interview that we did around this weekend, he was asked, what effect did it have on you when you spent 24 hours with Dada Rinpoche? And he said something very simple and very indicative of this real communication. He said, meeting Dada Rinpoche, meeting him, made me reevaluate how I was living my life. That's existential. Yeah. On retreat, when I was quite a young Dharma practitioner, I was on a retreat. I didn't know many people. And I was walking around the grounds of Taraloka, and I bumped into a Dharmacharani. I didn't know this Dharmacharani, but as she passed me, looked at me, she said, in, out, deep, slow. I know. We do things a bit differently now. I mean, that was fine the first time. That was quite fun. In, out, deep, slow. I think she'd been doing a lot of mindfulness retreats at the time, and it was before mindfulness got really popular, so we were still getting the basics of it, you know. And then I bumped into her later. She didn't know me, but she said, as we passed, she said, in, out, deep, slow. So something's occurring in this moment, which is that I'm obviously not in or out or deep or slow. I don't know what it means, but whatever it is, I'm not it. And then, in a puja, you know how you queue up to make offerings? I went up at the back of the queue. I mean, she was there. And she still said it. I mean, the third time, was not a joke anymore. But in the queue, she's like, in, out, deep, slow. And over those 6 days, long 6 days, I felt undone. Like something was being reflected back to me and I was groundless. Something was being reflected back to me that I didn't know for myself. I was seeing myself through another person's eyes, and they were telling me something needs to change here. And I had this thought, I need more input in my spiritual life. And I realised at this point I needed to live in community again. At that point I wasn't living in community. I have been living in community since 1984. But I had 18 months where I lived alone during that time. And this was when she said, In, out, deep, slow. And when I got back to Glasgow, where I was living, I contacted one of my closest friends and suggested we started living together in a community. It was an invitation to my friend to help me change and to help modify the person I was becoming. Do you want more input in your life? Have you asked for it? Do you really want it? How do we create a Sangha that generates that level of communication? I'm just going to list a few points that I just thought up. Make time for friendship in your life and don't waste opportunities. Friendships can be natural and they can also be generated. Go on solitary retreat, which means go deeper in your understanding of yourself. Strange as it seems, the depth of understanding we have when we're alone feeds our ability to be with others or feeds our communication with others. Make time for reflection. Reflection alone and reflection with others. Discuss your ethical understanding. Go into details about views. Talk to other people about what you're thinking about right now. Take risks in communication. Ask for more input. It's very interesting, in the Sevenfold Puja, we get this verse, entreaty and supplication, where we have to ask for a teaching, and then we receive the Heart Sutra. The Heart Sutra, or the teaching, does not arise until you ask for it. Be more of an individual. Stand alone. Be authentic. Take responsibility for your communication. Don't follow the group in certain ideas or values if they're not yours. Discuss values and how to maintain them. And finally, have a vision for communication. Have a vision for friendship. And develop an understanding that we're all part of the same project and that none of us can simply be consumers. This community isn't ready-made. It's a process that is only the interaction and reaction of being, of the people within it. Play your part. I'll just finish with the last paragraph from Bante's talk, Is a Guru Necessary? He says, I think we've all seen how very difficult it is for the individual to evolve at all, how it requires great effort, an effort which many people are perhaps not prepared to make. But we've also seen that difficult as evolution is, as the higher evolution is, it's also very much worthwhile. In fact, we may say that this higher evolution of the individual, is the most worthwhile thing to which any human being worthy of the name can possibly devote themselves.
We hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. Please help us keep this free. Make a contribution at freebuddhistaudio.com/donate. And thank you.